Recording. Hi, DeMone. How are you?
Hey Tim, what's going on, man?
Not too much. I really appreciate you doing this, especially because I know you had a full day in rehearsal, and now it's in the evening, and you're taking the time to talk to me. So I really appreciate that.
This is great. I'm glad to do it.
When you got the offer to come and direct this play in New Hampshire, I'm wondering what was in your head, and what your first thoughts were.
Um, my first thoughts were we've just buried uh, a couple of kings, um, George Floyd, Ahmaud, but before that, we buried several kings, Trayvon. Um, uh, I mean, the list is just too exhaustive.
Yeah.
But the thing that struck out to me from 1968 to 2020, black and brown kings are being hunted, murdered, and assassinated at rates most disproportionately, and the the instigators of those murders go without punishment and very often with promotion and acclaim. Um, and so that our history is still being played out in the present and seemingly shapes the possibility for our future. It is an embarrassing, disgusting uh, mark on our country that this story is still relevant. Uh, and that we get to do it in New Hampshire, and in an area in New Hampshire where Black and Brown people are not visibly present in great numbers.
Right.
Yet the story is still important because it will be viewed by people who can make a decision to be allies and stand up and speak against the abuse and the outright murder of Black and Brown people, especially Black and Brown men.
I know it's something that I struggle with a little bit, if I'm, being totally candid. I think that
Yeah.
living in a place that is, as you say, not demographically diverse. New Hampshire is an overwhelmingly white state, high 90%. Um, I struggle
White
a
and
little bit.
conservative.
What's that?
White and conservative.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're politically very purple. We've voted both Democratic and Republican presidential elections. Our entire congressional delegation is Democratic. Our governor is a Republican. It's a very interesting kind of state politically, I think. And I struggle personally with the best way to be that ally in a really, white area. And then I think I struggle in my role as an administrator of a theater, and how the theater can be can fill that role, particularly this theater in this place with our audience. So when I saw this on this play on the schedule, I was really excited to have this conversation. Actually, this very conversation that we're
Mm-hmm.
that we're having right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess certainly not putting it on you to answer that question for me.
Sure.
But I think that it's probably a question that is maybe in the minds of some of the audience members who are going to be seeing this piece. It's interesting. The play premiered in 2009 and on Broadway, and I think in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So we're 9 years removed from that. And I wonder if there's part of trying to figure out how to be a supportive ally. Is there something in the conversation between the passage of history, or the lack of passage of history, as you say, from 1968 to 2009 to 2020?
I think so. I think it's a challenge to the humanity of us as human beings, particularly our white counterparts, to be angry enough to present, to show up with the anger that you show up with when a dog is abused, to show up with the anger and the angst and disgust that you show up with when the whales and the manatees are being threatened with extinction. uh, that same fierceness would be appreciated and is warranted by Black and brown people who are being gunned down. But then it also begs that you look at yourselves to say, what is it in us that we're comfortable with standing idly by? What is it with us that we're comfortable in enacting such assaults? To do the self-reflective work that will then allow you to show up with the heart of empathy and care and a voice and presence that says no more.
Yeah. And it's being in a relatively insular place. I think it's easy to look at the news and sort of, in a well-meaning way, sort of tisk and shake your head and say, this is a terrible thing. I mean, I don't think anybody disagrees that it's a terrible thing, but then to what is the step after that, I guess, is the.
Yeah, I beg to differ. I think people have not come to the realization that it's a terrible thing. If they came to the realization that it was a terrible thing, people fly from LA to Timbuktu for the bear that was mistreated in the circus.
Yeah.
Because that's a terrible thing and it demands their presence. So, where is the value? Or what is it in you that allows you to devalue
Right.
another where it doesn't warrant you showing up? Oh, but I'm in New Hampshire. So no, because if it were if we killed another, oh, I don't know, take your animal of choice. You'd leave New Hampshire and be in Los Angeles or California to march with PETA to say, oh no, we can't do it. We must not. We're upsetting the balance of creation when you so flagrantly kill these animals for your own comforts and your own amusements. Well, damn it, what about the same thing being done to Black and brown people?
Do you think it has something to do with the overwhelmingness of the overwhelming feeling of the problem? Because we talk about this as an institutional, systemic issue, right?
Yeah.
The idea of.
I don't think it's overwhelming enough. Otherwise, people show up.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like how? Oh my God, you're wearing a mongrel. What is it? Pick that favorite animal, and people flock in droves in support of an animal. How much more valuable is a human life over that animal?
Right.
You wouldn't treat your dog this way, so why would you allow another human to be treated this way?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
when Michael Vick was fighting, having those dogs fighting, the disgust from white people from around the world was overwhelming. I wonder where those white people were when that kid was murdered by the cops, a child. Not even talking about an adult, a child. Where the hell were you?
Right.
But if it's a child that looks like you, now there's value. Because when that little girl came up missing, pick any other white girls, it was a national outcry,
Right.
international outcry. When that little Black girl comes up missing, it's a blimp in the report. What do white people, what does it take for you to value? Where's your value? Where's your sense of value? Or are we highlighting the fact that you do not value. And if you do not value, you have to ask yourself why.
Right.
And then you have to say, what, if anything, am I prepared to do about that? I think we're in a generation now, Tim. I just had a long conversation with some students, white students, which gives me encouragement, who are fighting against the university administration and faculty who are perpetuating these kind of systemically racist practices on their campuses. And the white students are standing with their Black and brown brothers and saying, no more. We will not show up. We won't audition. We won't, no. So I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by the wokeness of this generation in front of us right now. But it's our generation and that that have made the roads easier for this kind of destruction to take place, that I question and challenge. So I'm excited that it's being done here. I hope it pisses people off. I hope it wakes them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
Passionate.
no. I think it's really good. I think something that you said that's really powerful is the empowering their Black and brown classmates, right? And that's a huge piece of it for me, that the idea of trying to give a platform for voices and to be supportive in the efforts that are led by people in the community that are being oppressed, right? And I think that again, struggling locally with how to do that in a place where I am in many ways bereft of Black and brown colleagues, and we certainly have colleagues and collaborators. You're a collaborator of ours, but in terms of people who are here in this local community with us, I struggle sometimes with how to hold space for those people, right? And how to give that platform and pass that microphone.
Well, I wonder, Tim, though there may be only 10 Black people in the whole state.
More than that, I think, but yeah.
But I wonder, I often tell artistic directors, I say, it's not enough to invite them to come. You've got to go get them. We know where those people are, and we need to bring them into our communities. I look at the staff and admin roster for the Winnie, and I go, okay, so there may not be people living here, but you have relationships with people that you can make associate artists. You can say, this is a part of our community, and not just in February, and not just for the Black show. So the next time I direct here, I want to direct a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. So we're not bringing DeMone in just to direct the Mountaintop,
right?
But he's directing Fiddler. He's directing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's directing.
Maybe not back to back. I don't know if that would make your
your head spin. I think that would. Yes, absolutely. And so you've got. I'm questioning Neil as to going, how are you enlarging your territory?
Yeah.
And you have to be intentional, and not just saying, no, we invited you to come direct this play, but what's and I'm new to the crew, so what's the involvement of the other people of color,
right,
that you brought here? And it can't just be, they come in and they do the obligatory part in whatever.
Right.
Next time you do Mousetrap, I dare you to explore a new and exciting way to cast it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mentioned this in one of the webinars earlier, that Americans are by and large very comfortable with, in their media, consuming Black suffering. And we're not as comfortable as a nation in our media consuming Black joy and or anything outside of the category of suffering, right? We're gonna bring people in for civil rights narratives and slave narratives.
Yes.
And that's it, essentially.
Yes. That's horrible.
So the idea, I found that quote really inspiring, this idea of one way institutionally to be an ally is to look for A, those narratives of Black joy, but B, as you say, narratives that are not maybe specific to a particular community. I mean, when you do a
Yes,
Shakespeare, how are you casting your Shakespearean play?
absolutely.
That type of thing.
Absolutely.
I also have a couple of playwright friends who have talked about the one thing that some of them have started doing is, as they're writing, specifying and making explicit a character's
Yes.
ethnicity and background in both in text and in simple character descriptions at the beginning. That this
Yes.
person is 24 and, you know, of Indian descent, or this person, you know,
Yes.
whatever it is.
I
And
think
I
those
thought
moves
that,
are so important. They're so important because it pulls us out of our apathy. It pulls us out of our same old routine and the way we put things together. You know, generally when I go work for a company and we talk about my team, I'm really specific. I want my lighting designer to be a Black LGBTQIA person. I want my stage manager to be a white woman. I want my costume designer to be an Asian man. Like, I'm really specific as I work on these plays. All voices matter to me.
yeah,
Um, and so I want to make sure that I have a good representation of the world I live in on my team. And so a lot of producers look at me and go, "Well, does it have to be?" Yes. And I know them, and if I don't know them, go find them because they're there and they're waiting. Yeah, it's at the end of the day for me, Tim, it's not that deep. We spookalize a lot of things, and I go, it really isn't that spooky. It's not that hard.
yeah. It's a,
Doggone it, just do it.
it seems like it's a, when it fails, it's a failure of priority rather than a failure of ability.
Yeah. I mean, I look at, we have these conversations on Broadway. Oh, it's just so hard to cast the Phantom as a Black man. Why the hell is it hard? The Phantom's not real.
I have a friend who wears a T-shirt that says, "Cast inclusively, theater is literally fake." Right?
Is
Yeah.
they characters? These aren't real.
You're casting a character who has magical powers, but the thing that that's going to be unrealistic or non-realistic. Yeah.
Can I tell everybody a secret? I'm going to
Of
tell
course,
everybody a secret.
we won't tell anyone.
What we do ultimately isn't that deep.
We're going to edit this part out. You can say you can say whatever you want.
But here's the thing. It's like, we sit and we wring our hands and we see thousands of people because, oh my God, who can play Crosscad? Who can we get to play Puck? God dog it, it's not that deep.
Right.
It really isn't. It really isn't. We're grateful for the people who bring such depth and insight to these roles. But my God, at the end of the day, my friend says it's not brain surgery. We're not curing cancer. We're playing.
And I think I know what the answer to this is, but I just to ask the obvious question, what do you say then to people whose response to that is the obligatory, well, historically, right? And there's always the sort of wagging finger when they say it. Historically, in such and such a time period, it would be an entirely white room, or it would be an entirely what's the answer?
Right. So again, we go back to what the play is. There was a company that did Mountaintop that cast a white man as Martin Luther King. I feel like that person should have been taken out back and shaken within an inch of his life. Because
Wow.
that Martin is a very specific, very iconic, very famous. He's alive even though he's dead.
Yeah.
Like there's no mistaking who he is. Now, if we do The Iceman Cometh, Hickey is a made-up character. He's not based on anybody. He doesn't exist outside of the page. So Hickey Can be anyone. We all have pipe dreams. We all have these we all have disappointments, low disappointments in life. We can all connect to the Hickey story, black, white, green, gray, or whatever. But I cannot play the role of Richard Nixon in Frost Nixon.
Right. At least not in any production that we're talking about right now. You know, like I think
nowhere.
I mean, I always hesitate to say too much like X, Y, or Z is impossible. You know, I don't know.
It's all possible, Tim. It's all possible. I mean, I can play it.
It's not all a good idea, right?
That's not a good idea.
Right.
It's not a good idea.
But it's possible that some director in the future sells you on a concept and convinces you that it's a good idea. I'm not planning the production.
No, not at all. In fact, I would look at that person like this.
Because because Nixon was a real person, and because
Nixon was a real person, and the country, the world identifies him so specifically. I can't play Kennedy.
And if we stick with Nixon for a second, his race is a pretty important part of his narrative.
Yes.
Right? When we think about Nixon and the Southern Strategy, and you know all of those sort of essential to both who he was as a human and who he was as a politician is his race.
Yes.
And that piece, Frost Nixon, that you're talking about is all about breaking open who he was as a politician and who he was as a human. And
as a human being.
Yeah.
Now, I would direct it. I'd direct the hell out of that play. Love that play. Love that play. But if anyone ever came to me and said, hey, you should play Nixon, I would run far away from them before the gods opened up the heavens and rendered down lightning to take that person out.
To punish you for playing Richard Nixon.
Yeah, or to punish that person for even having the idea that I can play Richard Nixon, that I should play it. No doubt that I can play it, but that I should play it.
Is there?
I am not a crook.
Is there? Are there then? I presume yes, right? Then are there fictional characters where you go, this person's race as written is so essential to their narrative?
Once on This Island, my biggest disappointment with the recent revival is that Lynn and Steve, although they acquiesced, because at the end of the day, they want their show produced and they want that check. And that's another question that I have to ask. What are you willing to give up in order to create space and live in the center of your integrity? Once on This Island is so specific about they sing about it. Blacks fought against French and they hated Napoleon. They fought for their island and finally won. Daniel Bozome, the pale color of coffee mixed with cream. Not a Filipino.
Right.
These deities are very specific, and it's no hatred against anybody of the LGBTQIA community, but Asaka was the mother of the earth. Asaka literally gave birth through her body to the earth. That deity is very specific. Papage, very specific to those deities. And it's only the arrogance of white supremacist ideology that says we can come in and do whatever we want. But if I ever suggest, and I have suggested, that I would like to play Tevier, everyone looks at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah, it's the selective nature of where we draw the line, right? And the idea of take a total hypothetical and say you're casting a family, right? And well, okay, everybody in that family unit has to look the same. The audience knows that those people are not really a family, right? We expect them to suspend their disbelief. The house they live in only has 3 walls and no roof, right? Like there are things we already expect an audience to allow for, right? And to meet us halfway. You know, we invite them to suspend their disbelief and take part in the story. Our selective drawing of those lines prevents us from inviting the audience to ignore the fact that these 2 people don't look alike, who are playing family members and who are scripted to be biological family members and everything else.
It's like doing King Lear.
Right.
And putting that family together. Goneril is who? Let's say she's Asian. King Lear, he's very white. Very white. What's the other daughter's name?
Regan and Cordelia.
Regan, yeah. Regan is black. And Cordelia is pick another, pick whatever. Right?
Yeah.
But it's different when we say we're gonna do the Kennedy play. Ethel cannot be a Filipino woman. Rose cannot be Latina. Bobby cannot be Greek. Because that's very specific.
Do you feel like as a director that so say, let's go back to your hypothetical production of Lear that I just went online and bought a ticket to, because it sounds great. What do you think about then using, because we always play on audiences' expectations, right? So if Cordelia is the daughter who disappoints Lear by not proclaiming her love enough, strongly enough to him, and he not excommunicates her, but banishes her, cuts her out of the will.
Yep.
Is there a production where Lear and Regan and Goneril are white and Cordelia is black? Is there a
Ooh, that excites me.
Playing on the audience's knowing what is sort of been conditioned into all of us to make assumptions based on the physical representation of people's race. Is there room for that kind of casting?
Sure, because that's a whole other conversation. What does that black child, what's in her that makes it possible for her to say no?
Right.
Right? That's an interesting conversation. What is her experience in this white construct where the expectation is that she will proclaim without problem her undying love and support? But she says, hell to the no. Why? What's the dynamic in that family? I think that's interesting. And because at the end of the day, these specific characters, these specific people aren't real in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So in the conceptual phase, as a director, when you're planning these things, these are certainly questions that you can ask. And really what we're getting to is there's something that's truly exciting about that in terms of the storytelling and the options that are then presented to us as theater artists for storytelling. When we do adopt that actively anti-racist point of view, right, and say we want to tell interesting stories, and we want to break apart the sort of the dynamic that is, or the paradigm that's existed for as long as it has, and play with these additional options to play. We have all of these new puzzle pieces to play with, and not new is the wrong word, but by sort of throwing off some of those old assumptions, we now have I guess new but shouldn't be new ways of thinking about it.
It's a fresher palette. It's a fresher way of looking and exploring the possibilities of how that story is presented. And it's so exciting. On the other hand, though, because I stand in two, now I'm going to contradict myself. Because that woman who's playing Cordelia should be able to just play the truth of the text as it is.
Right.
And we shouldn't have, let the audience do that kind of layering. They see that. But on the other hand, as an actor, I say, but listen, you can't deny who I am.
Right. The truth of the moment is bound up in your identity and is going to be,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the contradiction is, but why we gotta make it about that? Can I just be in this family and
Right. Right. And in the
Shakespeare?
version you described originally, I think we're closer to that, right? Where we're creating a specific contrast in the version that I
Yeah.
suggested secondarily.
Yes.
I think that there's in
And I
that way,
love them both.
in the rehearsal room, you have to at least have the conversation, right? And say what is
Yes.
at some point. But I think you make
Yes.
a really good point about like, goddamn, the whole play doesn't have to be about it. Like there are,
No. It's like
Cordelia's
these.
first lines are, "I love you too much to flatter you," essentially, right? And
Yes.
there's a 3-hour conversation just in that
It's
line.
on that line right there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's But here's the other part, because I'm bringing us back to Mountaintop and my conversation with Neil, because we're also producing this play in the midst of a dual pandemic.
yeah.
But the one thing I said to Neil is that if you're gonna make me direct a pandemic Mountaintop, then count me out.
Can you
We
say
know
more
we're
about what you mean?
so there's a production of Godspell going on in the world, um, and it's a pandemic play with Godspell on the side.
This is the one at Berkshire Theater Festival you
Yes,
talked about.
complete with plexiglass, complete with measuring sticks to make sure we're keeping 6 feet apart instead of a cane for the vaudeville number. I see how ingenious you are about, but everything is a comment. We know we're in a pandemic. I want to come to the theater to escape the pandemic for an hour and 25 minutes. And what I appreciate about what we're doing here, and we have it easier because we're in an outdoor amphitheater. We've put all the protections in place. I just got my COVID test back again. It's negative. We're staying in pods.
Yeah.
We literally go from the house to the theater, maybe to the grocery store and back, so that we can just play the play. The audience comes, they know they have the social distance. We've done the work to make sure like we're a family, so we don't have to now because we're all negative, we're all sheltering in place together. So we can do this play. So I don't have to, I don't have to put up a plexiglass divider between Martin and Kamei when they get close.
Right.
Because now it becomes it becomes the pandemic play with Mountaintop on the side. Right. And the play is the thing, not the construct that we're playing in. We already know the construct we're playing in. We know this already. We have Unmasked. We know it. So I was like, if you're gonna make me hide these people behind plexiglass and whenever they get close to each other, they got to put a mask on to speak. Count me out, man. Right. I'll go back to the virtual space. And
although by definition of what the play is about, it does address that other half of you talk about a dual pandemic,
yes.
It's a play that very much lives in the world of the other half, or
yes.
the other part of that duality.
Yes, absolutely.
In any sort of piece that looks into history, there's the sort of triangulation, right? There's 1968 when it happened. There's 2009 or let's say probably she wrote it in 2008, right? So 2008, 2009, 2011 when it originally premiered, and then there's us now looking at it. So the time it happened, the time it was written, and the time that we're viewing it, and as those last two get further apart, perspective shift and change. How much is that a part of your calculus?
It is. I will say, number one, Katori wrote it that way. Like she literally wrote it through the ages, from 1968 through to, I think the reference she makes takes us up to Barack Obama's election. So for what we're going to
not to give away the end, but there's a very specific moment where we look forward, let's say.
Yes, there is yes. And so we will include those moments too. Those what would be future moments that are in fact for us present.
So in a post a post-Obama world. I mean, not
Yeah,
post-Obama. He's still around. He's still, but
yeah, but
in a post-Obama
presidency.
as president, in a post-Obama presidency world, is how has that? Because you've directed this before. Did you?
I did. I
What year
directed it
was
for
it?
my company. This is 2020. I think we did it 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years. So Barack was president.
So how is it? Is it different to do it now?
It is. It is different to do it now, only that it's sadder now. It's different to do it now um, because the man who instigated Birthergate now sits in the office with full knowledge of the severity of a pandemic that has killed thousands of Americans, and he's given space for violent rhetoric that leads to violent acts against Black and brown people. So things have grown worse.
Yeah.
We're in worse shape than when we did it before.
Yeah.
So it's a sadder day, not to be confused with Saturday. It's a sadder.
I was confused.
Somebody was going to be. Did he say it's a Saturday?
I thought it was on Monday. So there's that I think about the play, and we've talked about one of the things about it is there's already kind of a weight to the small amount of progress that's been made since the late 60s and before, clearly. But you're saying to do it in a contemporary context, in a 2020 context, feels like there's been a regression as opposed to
Yeah.
however small those steps felt in 2015.
Yeah.
Feeling.
And they were small steps.
So one of the reasons we're having this conversation, you and I, is because I made a comment to you a couple of days ago about preparing an article for the program. And, one of the things that I do in my position is to do that. And I said to you that I wasn't sure that I was the right dramaturg for this play. Because it is not my experience. It's not my story. And
I disagreed with you.
Yeah. Can you say what you said?
Yeah, I disagreed because it's obvious that you come to the process open. I disagreed because it's obvious that you're interested in having the conversations that will then allow you to disseminate information in an unbiased way. I disagreed because I think it is the conversation, and I said I want to title this conversation in black and white. That it's your willingness to show up to this conversation, and we're not talking about light stuff here.
Yeah.
I said, what does a dramaturg do? What's the job of a dramaturg? Can you tell us what the job of a dramaturg is?
It's the person who is in the room and speaks in advocacy of the play.
You're an ally, and that's what we need. We need allies to stand up, to advocate for those who have been marginalized and cast to the periphery of our existence. We need you to advocate and say, no, this story is important. And it's important not just for your entertainment, but it's important to thrust you back into the deep recesses of your soul and your heart so that you can do the deep work. And you wouldn't hear this challenge from someone who didn't look like you. So I'm a white man telling you, you got to go deep. Because the thing that gave birth to what happened in 1968 and to the thing that just happened last month at our hands. Now, we, black and brown folk, we got stuff to deal with too. But we talking about y'all. At your hands, it's not black people running into schools shooting up children. It's not black people. That's white men. It's not a black person who walked into a Catholic church or into a synagogue and shot it up after being welcomed in. That's us. That's y'all. What the hell makes it so easy for us to do that?
And I think that's where I go back to the overwhelmingness of the problem. You know, there's just, like you say, these are not light topics for sure. And I think that maybe part of the issue is that we start conversations thinking or expecting that there's going to be a definitive answer at the end. And maybe it's important sometimes to remember that the conversation can be the goal.
Yeah,
And
that is the goal.
we're going to talk about it, and we're not going to solve it because, you know,
We can't solve it in one
in
conversation.
in the space of a 45-minute talk back.
No,
But
at least we can pose the questions and how people respond to them. And again, I'm not posing them. We're having a conversation.
yeah,
You, as the advocate, can ask the question, and maybe the question is a bit easier to digest because it comes from someone who looks like you. On behalf of myself and Theodore and KP,
who are the actors in the show, we should
who are
say.
the actors in the play, and Katori,
Who's
and
the author?
Corretto,
Yep.
and Bernice, and Martin III, and Martin Jr. Like you now stand as an advocate just for us, just right there, and so many others. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you didn't not do it.
As long as we as advocates are doing the work ourselves, right?
That's it.
Because if we aren't, then providing that platform becomes tokenism and becomes signaling and becomes something that it isn't or shouldn't be. And that, you know, when we go back, we come full circle in the conversation. Certainly, being in a non-diverse environment, that's something that I worry about. You know, that I continue to do the work that's necessary to make sure that those efforts on our part are genuine and built on the foundation of something, as opposed to, as you say, gesturing toward an issue because it's February or, you know.
What are the plays and musicals that we can do that celebrate this community and that we can introduce our community to?
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to be your obligatory Ain't Misbehaving. What new works can we champion and create space for by BIPOC artists? Although I hate that acronym, but whatever.
Why?
I do. It's like
just because of how it sounds.
How it sounds, and it's like Black, Indigenous, people of color, but who else does that include?
Right.
I don't know. I find that problematic, but whatever.
I always think, because people talk about LGBTQ and the kind of ever evolving acronym that is, I always find I always like that. You know what I mean? Because there's the fact that some people say LGBTQIA, some people say LGBTQ+. When I was in college and taking queer studies courses, it was LGBT, right? Like it's or GLBT, or, you know, depending on. I always take the sort of constant evolution of the acronym as a good thing, because it means that we're not able to fully categorize everybody, right? That there's always kind of a churn in there, and that we're always trying to be a little bit better because we're revising it. And, you know,
I just want my letters back.
What?
I just want my letters back.
It's much simpler for you.
Just go. Oh my God, no! But listen, that I joke, but I agree with you. I just wish there was another way, I'm always hopeful. I treat every place I go to like it's my own home. And this place is different only because we're now forced to live in a very specific construct.
Right.
So I can't hang in the admin office. I can't get to know people like I would ordinarily. But if there's anything, I keep saying to Neil, I was like, okay, so when I come back to direct Sweeney Todd, or when I come back to direct Assassins, You know, I'm really stoked. If you have me come back to do Coriolanus, that's going to be exciting. Uh, I keep dropping on, you know. And here's the truth of the matter, Neil. You need us right now. You need it. In this culture and this time, you need it. You need to extend your team. You got to extend your team because right now it's real white. But you have relationships. You have relationships. And if we're going to be the institution to teach people how to move forward and walk forward through these dual pandemics, then we got to model it. We got to model it.
Yeah.
I say we don't need another Black theater company. I just need of us all to come together to honor all of our stories. Because I'm not completely for segregation. In some spaces I am, but the theater is not a space of segregation. We all should come together.
And I think there's a big difference, obviously, between segregation and affinity spaces, right? And the ability
Sure. Yeah, sure.
But I take your point for sure. How do we, in an environment where we know demographically in this state our audiences are going to be overwhelmingly white, what, I guess, two parts. One, what do we hope the conversation post-show is with that audience? And two, given that these are going to be two actors who have gone through a lot in the telling of this story and really sort of rip themselves apart to tell the story, how do we support them in that environment where they're not going to see people who can engage with that work in the same way that they can? You know what I mean? How do they walk to the lobby at the end of the show?
Let me go backwards. Let me answer the second question first.
Sure.
I think we have to honor them and honor the work. I think we have to create space where people can celebrate them, where people can be honest with them, but also laud them and welcome them into the community. Again, the pandemic doesn't give us the space and time to get up close and personal.
Right.
But that we encourage the community to come hear this story and the community shows up. And that we say, hey, there's a conversation at the end of this with the artist, that they stay with the artists and celebrate them for the hour and 20, 35 minutes of work that they just did. And then affirm their presence in the world. If you can enjoy them on stage, then you can affirm them in the world.
Right. How do we hope that a mostly white audience interact with this piece?
I hope they interact with brutal honesty. I hope they can be honest about themselves, about their experience, and then be open to the possibility of healing and restoration. I think that's what this time is about. We've all been leveled. There are no big eyes or little U's now. We're all in the same space.
Yeah.
If you breathe wrong, you're dead. You know, everybody's been affected financially. Everybody's been affected physically. Everyone's being affected emotionally. Like, no, we're all in the same space. And so what it creates is a possibility for empathy, which leads to healing and restoration. And I think that's important for this country. I'm a preacher too, and not to get super religious, but there's a part in the psalm where he says, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. He then restores my soul. But you can't be restored until you be still. And so my hope is that in the stillness, we're able to go deep so that we can be restored and walk into a newer space with greater possibilities for everybody.
I think that's a great place to leave it. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you, Tim. I'm glad we were able to do it, and I'm excited to see how it manifests in the playbill and how the conversations go.